Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual 92nd Street Y. Such a pleasure to be on screen with all of you. I so wish that we were doing this in person, although I will say the advantage is I am not wearing shoes. So there are silver linings to this scenario, but I'm so just delighted to be here this evening with Misty Copeland, who has written a new children's book, her second. It's called Bunheads, and we're here to celebrate it. And I will flash my copy. We will talk a lot about that this evening, but let me introduce myself and Misty. I am Radhika Jones. I'm the editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair magazine. And Misty Copeland is a principal dancer at the American Ballet Theatre. She's the first African-American woman to hold that position. She began studying ballet at 13 years old and hasn't stopped since. She's the best-selling author of a memoir called Life in Motion, which I highly recommend if you haven't read it. She's the recipient of the Lenore Annenberg Fellowship in the Arts and an inductee into the Boys and Girls Club Alumni Hall of Fame. She grew up in San Pedro, California, and lives in New York City. And again, she has just published her second children's book. It's called Bunheads. I road tested it with my son, who is 6, and he loved it. And I see some appearing on screen. It's such a great feeling, isn't it, Misty, to put something beautiful into the world, especially at this time. So we're gonna have a conversation. I'll ask some questions. And then at about 7:45, I'll throw it open to you. So go ahead and put your questions into the chat, and hopefully we can get a lot of audience members in. And I hope we'll have a lot of fun. So Misty, hello.
Hi, I just have to say, Radhika, I'm so honored to be here with you. Thank you to 92nd Street Y, but you have been such a supporter and a champion for me and in so many ways over the years. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I mean, what a great pleasure it has been to just have a ringside seat to your incredible career. And this, of course, our conversation is close to my heart because my background is in books and writing. So I love to see talented people turn their attention to stories, especially stories for children. This is your second children's book. Your first was called Firebird. And I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about the story, but also what draws you to this medium? What is it about writing for children in particular that you love?
Well, as a young person, I just didn't ever have a lot of security or stability and not really an outlet for me to express myself. There were no extracurricular activities. All I did was go to school, try to be invisible, and survive. So the only way I had to express myself was through reading books, this incredible way to have an imagination and to create. And I knew that I was an artistic person, but I just didn't know how to express it. So writing was probably one of the first tools that I possessed in expressing myself. I started journaling at a young age, and I'm so fortunate that I held on to all of those journals, and it really served me well when I wrote my memoir at 29 years old. I went through all of those journals, and it was so great to have such candid situations and stories that I could just pull straight from those journals. But not until I found ballet did I feel like I really found the form of art that I could really express myself. And it gave me a sense of belonging, worth, and it made me feel as though I was good at something. I was beautiful. And what's so, I think, contradicting is that most people would think, well, you're a brown girl in this very white world of ballet, so how is it that you felt that way? But in a lot of schools and studios, there is a lot of diversity. And this camaraderie that's built in the relationships, the friendships, whether it's mentorships with your teachers, your coaches, and I really wanted to highlight that. And so with both of my children's books, that was a real focus, that's something that's not often depicted in film and in television and media. It's often, these big movies like Black Swan, where it's kind of this over the top exaggeration with these negative tropes as to what ballerinas experience, and that just wasn't my experience. So I wanted to be able to create something that allowed for children of all, sexes, races, ages to be able to connect to and relate to. And so the story of Bunheads is me as a young biracial girl in a ballet studio, falling in love with this way of expression, this universal language, and meeting someone who was different from me, who was 3 years younger, who became my best friend, Catalina, Kat, we call her in the book, who is Mexican American. And we were very different dancers, but we supported one another and we grew and learned from our differences. And I just wanted that to be the real focus, is that you can have a support system around you and strive for your dreams and your goals.
That's something that really comes through in the book, is that that ballet class is a welcoming place. And it's also a place of stories. Like, you're drawn in, I mean, the young Misty, you tell me if I'm reading it wrong, but you're sort of drawn in by the drama of this story that's going to be danced and expressed through dance. And, I have to say, I have read a lot about ballet, but I had never kind of seen that visceral storytelling experience expressed in that way. Like, this is also part of the thing that can draw kids in, not just the point shoes and the tutus and all of the usual accoutrements that we think about, right?
Yes.
When we think about the picture of the ballerina. I was reading a profile of you. I have to say, I've been so looking forward to this conversation, and one of the lovely things was just immersing myself in reading your memoir and reading all about you in the last few weeks, because it's all you have such a wonderful life story and such a wonderful spirit that you bring to everything you do. So it's been very constructive in a tense time, shall we say. But I was reading a profile of you in the New Yorker in 2014, and the writer quotes Virginia Johnson, the artistic director of the Dance Theatre of Harlem. And she said she'd once been told by someone with good intentions that she could never be a ballerina because there aren't any Black ballerinas. A very matter-of-fact kind of statement, and it really drops like a shock, but it's a shock that I think is familiar to some of us who are maybe in roles where we didn't see a lot of people who looked like us. And I wondered if you talked about it in reference to the book, but I wanted to ask if you could talk about your own experience, because as you say, in many ways, ballet is very welcoming and open. And then in other times in your life and your career, you have felt more of that tension about representation. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Everything you said is just so right on, and just makes complete sense. What is so natural and organic about ballet is, I think, everything I experienced. I think that when you have people that come in with an idea of what they want ballet to be and kind of forcing it into something that it isn't, that's when you get people that want to exclude whole communities. When I think about the fact that ballet has been consistently relevant for hundreds of years, the one through line is the ballet technique. And the ballet technique is so strong, and it has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with your body type. It has nothing to do with all of these things that somehow have gotten intertwined with the culture. And that's just not the real base of what ballet is. And I think something that's so innate within the culture from the beginning was this amazing way of passing down knowledge and passing down experience, and this mentorship and camaraderie and support. So I feel like that's really been, so much of my experience. But living in the world and living in the real world, I feel like I was, coming from a small school and growing up in San Pedro, California, which was so diverse. I was very fortunate that I came from a small school that was also diverse. And a lot of that was kind of blocked out for me, especially because I started at such a late age, at 13 years old. And my teacher really thought, this girl has the potential to become a professional. And she said she had never seen a talent like mine and called me a prodigy, on day one. And it wasn't until I became a professional that I feel like I was really hit with the realities of not just the ballet world, but of the world, and what it is to exist as a person of color, and then navigating from there. But I do feel like all of the tools that I've learned from ballet, from just the raw goodness of what ballet is, gave me everything that I needed to be the woman that I am, whether I'm black, white, brown, yellow, green, red. The ballet technique and the true heart of ballet is what made me into the person I am.
It's so beautiful to hear that, because it does feel like, it must be a joy to have your profession be such a full expression of yourself. This year has obviously been so hard for the arts, hard for performers, and I wondered, how have you been coping in quarantine and with performances canceled, and what do you miss the most about performing? But also, are there other things? Are there some silver linings to this time that you would want to talk about?
Nice to hear you say that. Most people, I think, are just, like, how sad are you, and what are you going through? But I definitely, I think, see the silver lining in so many things that I experienced throughout my life. I can't think of another way of existing and having any kind of motivation to move forward if you don't see a silver lining. But it's been kind of a wake-up call, I think, for the dance world. Not for me personally, because I feel like it's something that I've been very aware of. A lot of the issues that we have in the dance world, whether it's the fact that I've really kind of transitioned and crossed over and having opportunities to have endorsement deals and work with really innovative companies, to see what's possible as an athlete and as an artist to reach so many people. And the ballet world just hasn't really made that step. And
Right.
in this time, we're being forced to. We have no other way of existing with theaters being closed. This is our livelihood. If the theaters aren't open and we're not, making money from ticket sales, then the companies can't pay us as dancers. So that's one layer of what's happening with COVID-19 and in quarantine. But then there's also Black Lives Matter, and there's also, the whole, what the world is experiencing in terms of the race issues we have globally, really just having a spotlight shined on them. And I think that ballet is right there at the forefront of being a part of systemic racism, and has been from the beginning of time. And so I feel like both of these things are just kind of like colliding and allowing the ballet world to really face the reality of where they need to be going in order to grow and stay relevant and broaden their audience. And so, I co-founded Swans for Relief, which is a COVID relief effort to raise funds for ballet companies globally. So I brought together all of my ballerina sisters. And again, as I've been saying, that camaraderie and support and friendship really, truly is a part of our culture. And so, I have 32 dancers from 22 professional ballet companies, top ballet companies from 14 different countries, and all came together and were like, yes, we're on board. We're all in this together. We performed a very iconic variation called The Dying Swan. It's a GoFundMe. It's called Swans for Relief. And we, I think, are a little over halfway to our goal, but it's, to help dancers in this time that, I've witnessed dancers here in New York City that dance with me at American Ballet Theatre who have had to get rid of their apartments because they can't afford them anymore. It's hard for them to even keep food on the table. You think about ABT being an international company, and you have dancers from all over the world, and they can't go home to their countries in this time. A lot of them can't collect unemployment. So it's a really, really difficult time for us, which I think seems frivolous to a lot of people in the grand scheme of things. But this is, they're artists. This is how we make our living. And I think we're such a contribution to the world globally. And I think it's, art and music and dance is what keeps us going in times like this.
Looking at the young faces on this Zoom, I couldn't agree more. It is wonderful what you've done with Swans for Relief. How are you keeping up your own practice at this time? You've always been so disciplined, and you talk in your memoir about the fact that as a ballerina, you never stop learning. You're always going to class. And so I'm curious how you're keeping up your technique and what you're able to do on your own.
It's difficult. Also, I'm 38 years old now, and times have changed and things have shifted. And there was a time, especially writing my memoir, where my whole life and focus was my career. I mean, it still is, but I have a lot of other things going on, and there are so many incredible dancers that are coming up at ABT and in the dance world, and I'm definitely not someone that kind of will hold on. I feel like it's a part of evolution of the dance world to celebrate and mentor and let that organically happen, where dancers can come up after you and shine, and not to kind of hold on to every last thread, when that's just not what's relevant at the time. And so I feel like I'm in a place where I'm loosening those tight straps of my training and my dancing, especially in this time again, because it's really difficult to be in a studio as dancers. We can't really keep up our technique and do what we need to do if we don't have the right facility, which is, again, has a lot to do with the money that we make. And a lot of athletes have the financial security and stability to be able to have a facility in their home to keep up their training, but we just don't. And so, there's definitely been a transition in terms of where my focus is, but it's still on an artistic expression. So whether it's through writing books, or I have a production company that I'm really proud of, with a really good friend of mine who's a woman of color, and to have those voices on those platforms, I think is so important in this time. But I'm trying to express myself artistically in any way I can, but maybe not as physically as I once used.
I can understand that. These are times for shifting and reprioritizing, right? But you can always be creative. That's the wonderful thing. Well, I know I said I was going to take audience questions later, but I have to say an excellent question has come in on the chat. So I'm going to ask this question, and maybe it will encourage other people to ask some questions. So this is from Ella. And she says, I've been doing ballet for 2 years. I have a question for Misty. What was your favorite ballet costume you've ever worn?
Oh, it's so hard to choose. I think one of my favorites, because it was just so glamorous and it was so rich in color, and this is more than one costume within that ballet, was the character of Gamzati in La Bayadere, which is set in India. And so there were a lot of deep burgundies and golds and beautiful headdresses and purples and face jewelry. And so I think that was probably one of my favorites. I felt like a queen.
I love that. We'll have to look up that picture when this is done. Okay, good. This is good because more questions are coming in. I'm going to switch. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit.
Okay.
So what do you think? Since we have such a wonderful, impressionable young audience here, I'm curious to know if you had to say one or two things that you think have contributed most to your success, qualities that you have. What do you think those would be?
I would think that it's my ability to share openly and be vulnerable. I think it's really difficult for a lot of people to do. And I think that because of the way that I grew up, I was often in this kind of vulnerable position of not having control over the circumstances I grew up in, and often being ashamed of them. Growing up without really having a home, or, often moving from friends' houses and just not having a lot of security and stability. And so I feel like as an adult, I have a more conscious understanding of what it is to be vulnerable, and that it allows people to open themselves up to you as well. And so I feel like that's kind of my approach as an artist. So when I'm on stage, I think it's really easy for me to allow myself just to be as naked and open and vulnerable as possible. And I think people really appreciate it as audience members, that they don't feel like there's this kind of mask that you wear to put on a performance, but that it's really me opening up my heart and soul in order to give everything.
Wow, that is wonderful. Okay, so one thing that I think people on the outside are always curious about with athletes and dancers and the like is when you pursue a passion and a profession that's as demanding as ballet, one that requires so much commitment. Do you ever have any feelings that you might have missed out on other aspects of life, or any regrets, or are there any moments where you think, well, I took this path, but maybe if I hadn't, I might have been a doctor or a scientist or something? I'm curious. It's not so much regrets, but just like, are there other Misties that you think about who might have been possible?
No.
What a great answer.
I mean, I just feel like as human beings, like the possibilities never end, and it's never too late to do so many things. As a young girl, I made the decision to be a ballerina. I mean, once it was offered to me, I said, this is what I want to do. It was the first time I ever felt like I was myself. So the sacrifices I made didn't feel like sacrifices. I couldn't wait to be in the ballet studio. I couldn't wait to be learning more information and absorbing all of that. And, I look at my colleagues who may have had a different path from me and maybe entered ballet for different reasons, but they may retire at 40 years old and still go on to be doctors and lawyers,
Mhm.
and whatever else you can think of that's possible to do as a career. But I think that the main lesson is that the arts and ballet, because I'm biased, will give you the tools to be able to do whatever you want in life. And it will allow you to have the discipline and to be able to really focus and understand and know what you want to do. And I think that's a huge asset, to be able to really give of yourself and enjoy yourself, but not thinking that you're going to miss out on anything, because life is so long and full, and there's so many opportunities to do so many things.
That is, yes, I think that's such a good thing for us to all be thinking about now, when there's a lot of uncertainty on the one hand, but also a lot of possibility. When in 2015, you became the first Black woman promoted to principal dancer at the American Ballet Theatre. It's only been 5 years, but have you, and they've been 5 eventful years in the world for you, all of these things. It was such a meaningful, historic event, obviously personally and professionally for you, but also for so many people around you, people who have been inspired by you. Have you felt a sense of progress that you can see, or how does it feel to be 5 years out from that moment and look around? Do you feel any difference, or do you think that things just take a lot longer?
I've seen a really big difference in one area, and that's the audience goers. But I feel like this time in quarantine, and again with Black Lives Matter, is where I've seen the biggest step in terms of ballet companies and schools and the community just globally listening for the first time. Like I've been having these conversations and speaking very openly and candidly about racism in ballet and the lack of diversity for 20 years of my career. And this is the first time I feel like I'm being heard, and that other dancers feel like there's a safer environment to be able to speak out as well. But the biggest thing that I've seen in terms of progress is the diverse audience. And that literally started the first performance of my Firebird in New York City at the Metropolitan Opera House, and it hasn't stopped since then. You know, I remember my manager, Gilda Squire, and I putting in so much work and really not just targeting the typical, you know, publications and things like that, that target, you know, the upper echelons, the upper class and elite that would come to the ballet, but we were targeting so many communities that don't often feel accepted or included in a theater like the Metropolitan Opera House. And to see on my first show, Firebird, more than half of the audience full of Black and brown people and so many kids was so much progress, and it just has continued pretty consistently since then. So that's a positive thing, and I think the more that we get kids into the theater that see themselves represented on the stage, then that's just a whole different group of children that are going to come into this culture later on. But it's a slow progression, but I feel positive about it.
Feel so aligned too with your children's books, because you know, not every child who reads one of your books may aspire to become a ballet dancer, but certainly they can become people who appreciate and love ballet, and that's so important too, right? I mean, that is the thing that will keep the community vibrant. Well, the chat is on fire over here, so let me catch up with a few questions. I love all of these curious and engaged people. I want all my Zooms to be like this. Can you all please come to my meetings?
It's amazing. I see Emily here. She's cooking, and it's so awesome. I get it, Mama. Take care of your family and be cultured.
That's great. Okay, so we'll do a few quick ones. Here is one from 3-year-old Lucia. What is your favorite color?
Oh, my favorite color is purple, which is so funny because when I met Prince and worked with him, the artist, like it was just a funny thing that you know, I don't know if that was something he knew before before meeting me, but it was like meant to be.
That's so great. Let's see. What is your favorite ballet to perform?
Romeo and Juliet, which is funny because I just finished, which is why I never wear my hair like this. I feel like I look like a little girl, but I just finished doing a performance type rehearsal with City Center here in New York City, where I was being coached on the role of Juliet, all of the acting scenes with ballerina Alessandra Ferri. But it's my all-time favorite role to perform because it's so meaty in the drama and acting.
Oh, that's so inspiring. I love that one too. So I think I'm going to listen to it later this week. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, here's one from Sharon, who says her 8-year-old just read a book about you. She's also a biracial little brown girl, and she would like to know, how did you become such a good ballet student?
You know, I feel like because of so much structure and discipline that I lacked in my childhood, that I feel like every child craves it to some extent. Probably won't admit it, but I think that we crave order as human beings, and I did not have any of that. And ballet was literally the perfect solution for me. And so I think that's why I was such a good ballet student, was that it was the perfect combination of artistic freedom and expression, but discipline and structure. And I mean, I got good grades in school because I was terrified to go home with a bad report card, but it was the first time that I actually was, you know, craving learning.
One thing that you wrote about so movingly in your memoir is that when you dance, you talked earlier about being open and being vulnerable. You have to always be open to criticism in a way that's really intense, and I imagine can be very intense for a child, and for you starting as a teenager when you can feel like the eyes of the world are always judging you. How, you know, it seems like something that you just were able to absorb into your character. But that must be hard for a lot of people. Did it ever feel like a problem for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think any human being can completely be like Teflon and just have it bounce off of them. But I feel like I've often understood and could see through when people's intentions were good or bad. I mean, it's difficult if it's someone you don't know, and in this generation, so many kids are on social media and you get hurtful words or criticism from people that you can't see and you don't know them and you don't know their intentions. So it's a lot harder to like sift through it. But in general, I feel like, if it's someone that, is in it for the right reasons and cares about you and wants to make you better, then I'm going to be open and vulnerable and not take it personally and be hurt by it, but that I know that it's because they want to make me better and I want to be better. So I don't ever feel like I'm defensive in those situations. But when it comes to the other things, the people I don't know, just have to like block it out and shut it down, because there's no way to control people's intentions and the hurt they might want to cause if you don't know them.
It's something that comes with celebrity too, and the kind of way that you've crossed over into the larger cultural sphere. You're so well known, and so of course it kind of opens the door for people who don't know you to decide who you are, or what you must be about. And you've always been so strong. Even you wrote about at times enduring criticism that you were seeking out too much attention, or that you were that was somehow a bad thing. But it feels like a real double-edged sword for someone like you, who rightly is trying to be a role model. You can't be a role model if you're not visible. It doesn't work, right? And so I often wonder, for people who are trailblazers, and it's just a fact that you are, do you feel a different kind of pressure because of that? I mean, there's so much to be grateful for, of course, in the experiences that you've had in your life, but there is also pressure that comes with it. And I wonder if you feel that and how you manage it.
I mean, again, there's only so much you can control. And all I can do is wake up every morning and feel happy with who I am and my intentions and what I want to accomplish. And I've always only ever gone after things that I know will make me better and will bring more awareness to ballet. That's why I'm in this position. It's because of ballet. No dancer gets into ballet to become rich or to become famous. And those were never my intentions. And I think that, like you were saying, it's a double-edged sword, and it's really difficult because as much as people want certain dancers to have to be exposed and to have people know about them, but then as soon as you are, then it's like, oh, well, you're doing too much, and is it for the right reasons? And so I feel like I've done my best and tried my best to be consistent in terms of my intentions, that everything I do, it's not about me, it's what I represent, it's about bringing people with me, it's about bringing the ballet world with me, it's about broadening our audience and diversifying our audience. So I feel like when I think of it in those terms, and again, when I'm just being true and honest to myself, and I have a support system around me that remind me of my purpose daily, that it just makes it easier to deal with all the noise.
Right. Here's another question from the chat. What would you recommend as the best first ballet to introduce someone to the world of ballet?
Well, in Bunheads, we introduced the ballet Coppélia, and I think it's a really great first ballet. It's the reason that I wanted it to be, it's going to be a series, Bunhead, so there's another book coming, but I wanted to be able to tell a story within a story, so that you're getting to know these characters of the Bunheads, this little misfit group of people, but that you're also learning about a ballet and the background of the story. And so with Coppélia, there's so many layers to it. It's so bright, it's so colorful. It's one of the few ballets that doesn't end in some tragedy with someone dying for love and jumping off a cliff into a lake. And so it's a positive and beautiful story with a light love romance. You get to see so many different cultures within this ballet. When she sneaks into the toy maker's shop, she plays with all of these different dolls. So there's a Spanish doll, and there's just so many cultures. And so I feel like it's a really great kid-friendly ballet, Coppélia.
That is a good idea. I cannot wait for us to all be able to go back to the ballet, back to the theater, back to opera, back to the movies. It is amazing. And what you were saying about the arts earlier really rings true. I think that they can feel less serious or less necessary, but the experience of the last few months has definitely shown me that there is something about not just experiencing a story, because we can do that on our screens, but doing it with other people around and sharing that emotion and watching performers make an emotional connection to you in the audience, which is such a special thing and so key to your talent. Another one about, let's see, I love this question. I often think about this in terms of books, but for you, it will be dance. Is there a role that you performed in the past that you'd like to revisit now that you're older, have learned more about yourself, and have further honed your craft? How differently would you perform that role?
I feel like at ABT, they're pretty good about recycling ballets. So I feel really fortunate that, I've never been someone that's gotten tired of a role or said like, oh, I've done it, there's nothing else I can learn. Like there are certain ballets that I've probably done for every single year of my 20-year career, and I learn something different every time I do it. But this ballet, I did it not too long ago, but I have to do it again, and I want to do it soon. And it's Manon. It's similar to Juliet, and it's a Macmillan ballet. And it is just another one that I think the more life experience you have, the older you get, like usually that's a ballet that's given to really experienced ballerinas. And so I did it for the first time last season. And it's just one of those things that like you get off stage and you're just like, I wish I could do it again right now. You can't sleep at night because you just can't you have so many emotions running through you. But that ballet, that and Juliet, I could probably do for the rest of my life. I don't know if my body could take it, but I want it.
Fingers crossed, right? Okay, and here's a question from Jaya. In the book Bunheads, it says you were shy on your first day of ballet. How did you overcome the shyness?
I think that it was connecting with another person. And so I remember, my story isn't exactly what happens in the book. My first ballet class was actually on a basketball court at the Boys and Girls Club. So it wasn't in a ballet studio. But I remember the first time I met Catalina, Kat, who's in the book. And like I was saying earlier, she's 3 years younger than me. And I looked so young for my age. I was really small. And I remember sitting on the floor just terrified. I was in an environment I wasn't used to. I was so far out of my comfort zone. And this girl comes up to me and she looks down at me and she talks to me like I'm a little girl. And she's like, how old are you? And I remember feeling away, and I looked up at her and I was like, I am 13. And that was the beginning of our friendship. And it made me feel so much more comfortable being in the studio, like making a connection with another person and knowing that we were like in this together, and that she made it feel like, even though she was younger than me, she was more experienced and she was going to help me and guide me. And it wasn't a competition. It was like, I'll show you the ways. And I was just really open to that. And that was really helpful.
And you remind us that it is a book not just about ballet, but about friendship, which is so important and which any kid or grown-up can relate to. And I will show it again just to make sure everyone is seeing it. And I want to remind everyone, we're not done yet. We have more time, but that there's a link available if anyone wants to purchase the book. But we will keep talking, and there's a few more questions in here, and I have a few more questions. Let's see. Do you, I'm sure you have a lot of people, when you've talked to so many young people in your work with the Boys and Girls Club, and we worked with President Obama and his council for, was it for physical fitness? Is that the name of it?
Nutrition, yeah.
And so, and I imagine you're asked a lot, for your advice when young people want to follow in your footsteps. Is there anything that you think of that people told you when you were young that you've kind of kept with you, advice that mattered to you?
I think that it's really allowing yourself to be open to help. That's something that, I think maybe sometimes with certain people and individuals have different experiences and times when they're ready for certain things. But I think to allow for support to come into your life. And I think it's really up to you. I think a lot of people aren't aware that they're not open to it and that there's support right in front of them. I've talked to young people that will be sitting next to their best friend and they're saying, I don't have a support system. And I'm like, who's next to you? And they're like, oh, so-and-so. And I'm like, that's support right there. But that's something that I feel like I've slowly learned, like the older I get, and again, the more that I'm open to it, the more that like incredible people just kind of flow into my life. And I think also just once you have a support system like that, then you have more tools and you're ready to kind of accept yourself because you feel loved and you feel supported. And so you feel comfortable enough to have that confidence and love for yourself. And I think one of the best advice, some of the best advice I've ever gotten was from a former ballerina who coached me. Her name was Susan Jaffe, was to not let other people's words define me. And that's really stuck with me through so many situations in my life.
Is there any role that you haven't performed that you would like to perform?
Probably Onegin. It's another one of those ballets that's usually done by older ballerinas. It's really dramatic, but that's probably one of them. I'm kind of past the really, like the Sleeping Beauties and the Swan Lakes that are just extremely difficult technically. But I would say Onegin, yeah.
Is there, I'm curious, at ABT, is there, being part of a dance company, you're such a tight community. Is there like any formal mentoring that happens there, or is that something that you do?
It's something that I've always done, whether I was aware of it or not. And that's what I think is another beautiful thing about the ballet structure and community is that it's really ingrained in ballet, that when you have like ballet coaches that they're there to pass down their knowledge and experience. Like there is dance notation, but a lot of what we get is passed down from one ballerina who experienced it from another ballerina who got it from the original choreographer. So that mentorship is really ingrained in the ballet community and culture. So I think that has a lot to do with why I naturally gravitate towards young people, or they gravitate towards me, because I feel like I'm open to giving my experiences and helping and guiding young people. So yes, I do. I've been doing it since I was 13 when I got my first fan mail asking me to like help and guide someone, which I was like, I don't even know how to help myself. But I'm so proud of so many of the young people I've mentored that have gone on to dance professionally all over the world, and some that are actually my colleagues now in the company, which I'm like, how old am I that I was mentoring someone at 12 years old and now they're my colleague and they have the locker next to me. So it's a beautiful thing though, to be a part of that process and see things come full circle.
Aside from dance, what is your favorite form of art or entertainment?
Music. Definitely music. It was it was what drew me to dance. From a young age, my family was constantly had music playing around the house, my mom, and it motivated me to move. And I started choreographing probably around the age of 7. I mean, I'd never heard classical music. I'd never seen any form of, classical dance, but, I was choreographing to Aretha Franklin and George Michael and Mariah Carey, Prince, all, pop music. And the only form of dance I'd ever seen was on VH1 and MTV and BET. So that was my, what I thought dance was. I mean, it is dance, but that was my only kind of exposure to it. But to this day, whenever I need to find balance and feel grounded, music is what I turn to. Even if it's right before, performance of Romeo and Juliet or Swan Lake, I'll put on the craziest stuff you wouldn't think of, Drake, before I step onto the stage. Dead deal.
Now we know. Something, part review, part rave, part question from Kathy. She says, I saw you in Romeo and Juliet and your performance was so lovely and moving, I couldn't stop crying. And to this day, I'm moved to tears when I think of it. That is the power of performance right there. How did you learn to be such a good actress while also dancing?
It's something that I didn't realize I was good at or comfortable with, probably until I was about 27, 28 years old. But I think a lot of it had to do with my comfortability on stage and my ability to be able to bring my life experiences on the stage with me. I've been able to do that since I was a little girl. That there was this, it was like the only way I could process all of the trauma and the hurt and everything I'd experienced. It just happened innately when I would get onto the stage. It was like, oh, now I can talk about it, but it was through my expression of movement and dance. And it's just always how I've always been a very expressive dancer. But the more opportunities you get, like there's no denying that if you don't give someone an opportunity, there's no way they can know if they're capable. And so, I wasn't really given my first opportunity to do a character role until probably Gamzadi or Juliet, which, as soon as I'm on a stage, I feel so safe, which is strange because most people feel just very naked and vulnerable, but it's like, okay, there's a sea of black out there. I can't see anyone's faces and no one can come up here and touch me or say anything to me. So I'm free to do anything I want. I mean, to some extent, you might hear from your artistic staff afterwards for not doing what they asked you to, but you really do have that freedom. And so I feel like that's allowed me to be as expressive as I am.
One of the things I felt reading your memoir and also looking at the children's books is we are all so lucky that at 13 you found this great love. You really, it has changed the world and certainly has changed the world of arts. And as a parent now, I have a 6-year-old son, I live in fear that he has some amazing skill, but I'm going to miss it. Or he's not, or that, there won't, like, we'll just never take him to that piano lesson. And so the world will never know, right, that he could have been. And there's no answer to this anxiety. Because the last thing you want to do also is push your kid into a zillion things. But I do wonder, you're not a parent yet, I think, but you must encounter a lot of parents whose kids have aspirations and who have aspirations for their kids, and you had a lot of support from your family, but also you were looking for an order that your family wasn't providing. And I wonder, how do you think about that, like the serendipity of what you found in ballet and the kind of like the possibility that maybe it wouldn't have happened. I mean, in a funny way, you did, though. You loved music and you kind of knew you loved to be on stage, and that had happened. And so maybe something else would have brought you there. But it's so interesting to me to think about, like.
It is. And I often have these conversations with my husband. I mean, I'm definitely not jaded. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think I literally was having this discussion an hour ago with my husband. Just so many different things have happened that I'm like, I can't believe so many opportunities I have, like knowing where I came from. I just never imagined I'd be in this place. But as you were saying, I think that like um, you're going to gravitate towards what you want to do. That's my feeling. I innately was drawn to music, which made me want to move and dance. And so that connected me in some way to ballet. So it wasn't like I was just sitting at home on the couch and I was like, I don't want to move my body. And then somehow I'm miraculously a ballerina. But there was something inside of me that was leading me and drawing me towards art. And it was something that I needed in my life. So I do think that it's important to, and again, I'm not a mother and I'm not going to pretend to be a parent and know what it's like at all. But I feel like, you know, the more you kind of just give them so many options and allow them to like figure out what they want to do, like it'll organically happen.
That is very good and restful advice for the parent. Thank you. Let's see. Kim wants to know, have you thought about what you will pursue after ballet? Of course, you're already a writer and you have many other things going on, but do you think about kind of what will take up the bulk of your time?
I mean, I feel like I'm getting a little bit of a taste of that right now. Where, you know, I feel like, again, I'm just so fortunate to have so many opportunities at the same time, you know, within my career. You know, everything's connected to ballet in some way, but I already do have a lot of amazing things that I'm already kind of transitioning into. This is my fourth book. I have a production company, as I was saying. I've got more than a handful of projects in the works for film, scripted and unscripted, and TV projects, and then film projects that I'm really excited about. Gosh, what else? There's just so many incredible opportunities that I just keep my mind open to. I don't limit myself, and I think that's why things happen organically, because I never think of something being a beginning or an end. But just kind of going with the flow and taking chances and allowing myself to explore, be taken out of my comfort zone, and to be able to grow.
One more from our wonderful audience. Are there any other forms of dance beyond ballet that you practice or want to learn?
I'm not very good at other forms of dance.
I don't believe that, actually.
Well, I guess I don't really explore them because I don't really have like the time. I think because I started dancing so late, I didn't have that opportunity. You know, as soon as I started ballet, it was like all of the hours in the studio were committed to learning as much as I could, because the ballet technique is not something you can learn overnight. That's why dancers start so young, because there's so much to know, and then you have to make it second nature in your body. But you know, I love contemporary dance, but I think everything is connected to ballet in some way in the form. I enjoy watching tap. I enjoy watching like hip hop, but I don't do it.
So I'm just looking at our group here and thinking, since we have some kids and obviously a lot of ballet lovers, I wonder if we should maybe close with a look ahead. This has been such a curious year, and it's been so challenging for for all of us in New York, which has gone through so much, and for kids who have to go to school differently and do things differently, and who maybe have been separated from their friends, and for parents too who are coping with all of those changes and coping with different ways of working and all of these things. And I just wonder, Misty, do you think about, and I know we don't know when this will happen, but do you have a picture in your head of kind of the day that you return to the stage after all of this? Do you have any dreams about that you'd like to send us off with?
You know, I feel like in this time, I was saying before, like with this, the silver lining of what we're going through is that I feel like theater is going to be something completely different when we come out of this, and whatever our new normal is. I feel like it'll be an opportunity for so many more people to be included. whether it's creating outdoor theaters in so many communities where they might have been excluded before, you know, where kids could literally just come out of their houses and you're just on the block and there's live performance happening. That's how I envision the future of dance and the future of art and the future of theater. And there's so many directions and ways that we can go, that I feel like this is a blank slate for, you know, the performing arts world. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I hope that all of you can be a part of it in some way and don't feel limited at all, but that everyone should be included in the arts.
That is a wonderful vision. I love that. And I'm so grateful to everyone for joining us tonight. And don't forget, this is Bunheads. It's wonderful. Buy it and read it and share it. And Misty, you are such an inspiration and such a light. And thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out and supporting me and supporting 92nd Street Y. Thank you. Thank you, Radhika.
Good night, everyone.